Hi, I'm Jules Sandison for FionaDobson.com, and today we're talking about the road to transition. For a moment, I want you to close your eyes and imagine a beautiful bay. The waters of the bay are sometimes calm and sometimes quite choppy. You can imagine them with sun on them, occasionally a little bit of wind moving across the bay. Now, naturally, the occasional storm comes in, bringing flotsam and jetsam, which gets washed up on the shore. The tide comes in and goes out, and on those periodic, very low tides, the sandbanks and shoals appear. But most of the time they remain quietly beneath the surface. The big ships stay in the deep channels and a little off the shore, and only the small boats ever really see the shoals, some even landing on them to explore, sunbathe in the comfortably remote location that only appears infrequently. Now that image, for me, is not a bad metaphor for the transgender qualities within me. Those sandbanks and shoals, only exposed at the lowest of tides, are like the transness within me, only emerging now and then, and much of the time you'd not even realize it was there. At least so it seemed for much of my life. As I entered my 50s, things began to shift quite substantially. You might think of it as the water level in the bay falling. Quite quickly, those sandbanks became permanently exposed. In fact, they became part of the daily landscape. It has been suggested that in this metaphor, the sea level might be my testosterone production, which I'm told declines as middle age progresses. So much for metaphors. My childhood was not filled with trauma. I was sent to a boarding school at 7, but so were many other kids like me, and so far as I know, I'm the only one who is now trans. Nothing happened that did this to me in childhood. I was an angry teen, like most teens, and it's tempting to wonder if that was perhaps something which gave early signs that there might be cause for concerns. But it didn't really feel like it at the time. Like so many others, I was an angst-ridden, goofy adolescent. By my mid-20s, though, I was behaving in a way that I would later see as related to subsequent events. I was loud, drank with the boys, and generally behaved pretty badly, as real men are apt to do. I did this just a little too well. I got into a very manly profession, and one way or another proved what a man I was. Eventually I came to understand that many like me do exactly this. We sometimes try just a little too hard. It's called overcompensation. At some point, 3 children later, I understood this wasn't healthy. I knew something wasn't quite right, but I had no idea what. I was suppressing something, but there was no way to know what it was. It wasn't until my mid-40s that words like transgender began to fall into common use, and only then was there open discussion of something that sounded awfully familiar. As I learned more about gender, I began to realize this is a part of me that's always been with me. And part of my life has been the struggle to suppress it. A struggle that has often impacted my life in ways that have hurt me and sometimes others. There are templates for how a young man or a young woman should behave. Guys do this, girls do that, but there's no template for a young trans person. And all the time, there's a battle raging inside, pulling in 2 opposite directions. I don't have to tell you of the depression, suicidal thoughts, and self-doubt that accompanies such a struggle. And this is our normal. No wonder so many trans people suffer from mental health issues. And gradually, you learn more, and what you once thought of was just a fun fetish, you realize is the only time you do feel normal. Once you realize what's happening, one way or another, you know you're living a lie, and at that point you realize the only choice you have is when to stop pretending. I'm Jules Sandison for FionaDobson.com. This brings us back to the start of transition, and you can find a link to a talk about that in the description below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll have another video out in about a week, assuming Donald Trump hasn't all blown us to hell by then. If you'd like to include some of your own story in the comments below, I'd be really interested to see them.